I sit here now in a cold hospital room, watching my father fight for every breath. His strong hands, once steady, now tremble. The man who gave me everything is fading before my eyes. I look at my father, his face pale, his voice weak. He turns to me and says, "My son, you must not lose hope." Hope? How can I have hope when I've lost everything? The business is gone. The wealth is gone. And the weight of our debts presses down on me like a mountain. I tried to fix things, I really did. But every door I knocked on closed in my face. Every effort led to failure. And now I have nothing. But once there was a time, not long ago, when I was young. Chapter 1. When I was young, I thought life was simple. My father had money, so I never worried about anything. I didn't study much, and I never worked. I had everything I wanted. If I saw something nice, I asked my father, and he bought it for me without question. My friends often told me to think about the future, to plan ahead, but I just laughed. Why should I worry? Why should I work? My father had money, and that was enough for me. Every morning, I woke up late. Breakfast was served in bed. I spent hours watching TV, and when I got bored, I went out with my friends. We dined at the finest restaurants, wore the most expensive clothes, and drove fast, luxurious cars. Life was easy and full of fun. I thought it would always stay this way. Money was never a concern. I never thought about how hard my father worked to earn it. I never asked about his business. Never wondered how things ran. I only cared about my own comfort and pleasure. When I wanted to travel, I did. When I wanted new shoes, I bought them. When a new phone came out, I got the best one. My father paid for everything, and I took it all for granted. I lived only for today. Tomorrow didn't matter. But one day, everything changed. My father called me to his room. His face was serious, which was unusual. He told me to sit down. I smiled, thinking he would talk about something trivial. But his expression didn't change. He looked worried. I felt a strange nervousness, though I didn't understand why my father had always been kind and generous. He never said no to me. But that day, there was something different in his eyes. He took a deep breath and said, "Son, we need to talk." I laughed softly. "Yes, father," I said, still not taking him seriously. But he didn't smile. "You're not a child anymore," he said. "You must start thinking about your future." I shrugged and smiled. "But I have everything I need," I replied. My father shook his head slowly. "You have everything because I work hard," he said. "But life isn't always easy. One day, things might change." I didn't understand. I thought he was just worrying for no reason. "Nothing will change, father," I said confidently. "You worry too much." But he didn't smile. He just looked at me for a long time and said, "We'll see." I didn't think much of his words. I went out with my friends that evening, laughed spent money, and enjoyed myself, completely unaware that my life was about to change forever. Chapter 2. Life was still the same, comfortable, filled with joy, and wrapped in carefree ease. But my father's words kept echoing in my mind, the sadness in his eyes, the seriousness in his tone. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, those thoughts kept pricking my heart. One morning, as usual, I woke up late. The servant brought breakfast to my bed. When I picked up my phone, there were messages from friends. Someone wanted to go shopping. Someone planned a dinner. Life was as busy and enjoyable as always. But then, suddenly, my phone rang. My father's number flashed on the screen. It was surprising because he never called me this early in the morning. I answered the call, and there was an unusual tiredness and restlessness in his voice. "Son, come to the office right away." His tone was commanding, which was unlike him. "Is everything okay, Dad?" I asked, feeling a bit anxious. "Just come." He didn't offer any explanation and hung up the phone. My heart started beating fast for no reason. I quickly got ready and drove to my father's office. As soon as I entered his room, the entire atmosphere felt different. The man who always seemed strong and confident looked tired and worried today. The lines of concern on his face were clearly visible. "Sit down," he said in a low voice. I sat down. "Dad, what's wrong? Why do you look so worried?" He took a deep breath and remained silent for a moment before speaking. "Son, things are not okay. The business is in trouble." Those words were unbelievable for me. The business that had always kept us prosperous. The business that gave me my luxurious life. It was in trouble. "But how?" I asked in disbelief. "Some decisions went wrong, and sometimes luck doesn't favor you. Now the situation is such that if we don't find a solution soon, we could lose a lot." There was a helplessness in his voice that I had never heard before. "But Dad, you always manage everything." "You always have," I said, clinging to a weak hope. He looked at me, and I saw a strange kind of sadness in his eyes. "I'm tired, son. It's not always possible to handle everything alone. It's time for you to learn something, to take some responsibility." Hearing this, an unfamiliar restlessness spread within me. I had never worked, never taken any responsibility. But maybe the time was about to change, and I had no idea how much the coming days would turn my life upside down. Chapter 3. The drive home felt longer than ever. My father's words kept playing in my mind. "It's time for you to take some responsibility." Until now, life had been easy, untouched by any real worries. But now, there was a heaviness in my heart that I had never felt before. That evening, I sat alone in my room, my untouched dinner lying cold on the table. The house was silent, but inside me there was chaos. I kept thinking, What did my father expect from me? How could I help when I knew nothing about business? The next morning, I woke up early for the first time in years. There was no servant bringing breakfast to my bed. Instead, I went downstairs and saw my father sitting at the dining table, reading some files. He looked up, surprised to see me. "Good morning, Dad," I said, trying to sound normal. "Good morning," he replied, his eyes studying me. "You're up early." I thought maybe I could come to the office with you today," I said hesitantly. A faint smile appeared on his tired face. "That's a good idea." When we reached the office, the atmosphere was different from what I had imagined. I thought it would be a place of calm and control, but there was tension in the air. People moved around hurriedly, their faces serious and worried. It was nothing like the carefree world I was used to. My father took me to his office and handed me some files. "Start with these," he said. "Understand the basics." I opened the files, but the words seemed foreign. Accounts, profits, losses, debts. My head started spinning. By afternoon, I felt drained. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, invitations to lunch, plans for the evening. For the first time, I ignored them. Later, my father called me into a meeting. As I sat there, listening to discussions about falling shares and bad investments, I realized the gravity of the situation. Our company wasn't just struggling. It was on the edge of collapse. After the meeting, my father spoke quietly. "Son, there's something you need to know. If things don't improve, we might lose everything. The house, the cars, this life." My heart sank. The comfort and luxury I had taken for granted were slipping away. And for the first time, I felt fear. Fear of a life I had never known. That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of reality was settling on my shoulders. I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to change forever. Days were passing, and with each day, my life was sinking deeper into a quicksand from which there seemed no way out. My father's business was getting worse instead of recovering. The company was drowning in debt, and unrest was spreading among the employees. Every day brought a new problem. Sometimes a major client broke a contract. Sometimes supplies were halted, and sometimes discrepancies appeared in the accounts. I spent my days and nights at the office, tangled in files and meetings. But the more I worked, the more the problems piled up. Sleep had abandoned my eyes, and my mind was burdened with constant worry. One day, my father called me into his room. His face was serious, and there was a heaviness in his voice. "Son, we have to make an important decision. If we don't act immediately, our company will go bankrupt." "So what do you think we should do?" I asked anxiously. My father took a deep breath. "We'll have to sell some of our property. Maybe the farmhouse or the old land your grandfather bought." My heart sank. That land was a part of our family's legacy, a treasure of memories. But the situation had become so dire that emotions no longer had a place. Do whatever you think is right, Dad. We just need to save this business, I said, my voice heavy. But fate seemed to have turned against us. The buyers backed out at the last moment, and our problems only grew. I spent long hours at the office, sometimes staring out the window, sometimes blankly looking at the files. My friends had drifted away long ago, and my life had become nothing but a struggle. One night, when I finally got home, I found my mother waiting for me. Worry was clear in her eyes. "Son, how long will you keep exhausting yourself like this?" "Until things get better," I replied, my voice tired. "And what if they don't?" Her voice trembled. That question hit me like a dagger. I had no answer. The truth was, even I didn't know when, or if, this nightmare would end. The next day at the office, more bad news awaited me. Our biggest project had been cancelled, taking our last hope with it. When I entered my father's office, I found him sitting with his head bowed, as if the weight of years had suddenly fallen on his shoulders. "Dad," I said softly. He looked up, but the spark that had always given me courage was gone from his eyes. "We've lost, son." Those words pierced my heart. My hands trembled, and tears welled up in my eyes. I had never imagined that our lives would reach this point. That night, as I sat alone in my room, I felt the full weight of my helplessness for the first time. The life of luxury and comfort I had always known was slipping through my fingers. And I, who had once been unaware of the world's hardships, was now caught in the middle of them. This was just the beginning of the storm, and I had no idea what was coming next. Chapter 5. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. But instead of getting better, our situation only got worse. My father's health was deteriorating day by day. The business was almost gone, and the burden of debt was crushing us from every side. I tried everything I could, but failure met me at every turn. One evening, I was sitting beside my father in the hospital. The pale look on his face and the dimming light in his eyes broke my heart. He looked at me and, in a weak voice, said, "My son, perhaps my life was only meant to be this long, but you must not lose hope. What's left now, Father?" My voice trembled with tears. "We've lost everything." He held my hand tightly. "No, my son. Losing everything isn't just about losing wealth. You've seen life up close, faced hardships. That is your greatest wealth. Now it's time for you to start your life anew." A few days later, my father left us forever. His death shattered me, but his last words echoed in my heart. I decided it was time to rise from the ruins of my past and build a new identity for myself. I made the difficult decision to sell the business. Whatever little was left, I gathered it and set out for a small town to begin a new life. A life of simplicity, free from the greed for wealth and the arrogance of luxury. A year later, I owned a small cafe. From morning till evening, I worked myself, serving tea and coffee to customers with a warm smile. My life was simple, but it was filled with peace. I had learned that true happiness doesn't lie in comfort and riches, but in hard work, honesty, and love. One day a young boy came into the cafe. The pride and carelessness in his eyes reminded me of my younger self. I served him tea with a smile, wondering if life would one day teach him the same lessons it had taught me. That evening, as I closed the cafe, the sun was setting on the horizon. The air was cool, and my heart was at peace. I looked up at the sky and whispered softly, "Father, you were right. The real wealth lies in understanding life. And in that